So gives us great pleasure to be here, and we are very grateful to the Film and Video Communication Department for having us here to be the opening bats people for this master class. And this is going to be a Jugalbandi. Hopefully it will not be stereophonic and we won't overlap with each other.
Actually, for both of us, the idea of a master class makes us very nervous because we are no masters at all. We have now no formal training in filmmaking, and we call ourselves self-learning filmmakers. And we have actually learned a lot from the subjects and communities that we have interacted with, and also the thousands of students we have kind of learned with, so to speak. Even today, each film that we make is a challenge for us. And when you begin to make a new film, we start that with a lot of trepidation. So that's a opening gambit to say that this is no master class. What we are going to do is to kind of place before you a set of extremely tentative ideas which we have found useful, and probably these are not new ideas at all. These are probably some ideas that you've already incorporated into your practice. So it's more like a dialogue that we're going to start.
So we've screened our films, well, thousands of times, and there are two questions that we always dread after a screening. The first is, what did you want to say through your film? And the second is, what is the impact of your film? So I think that sort of puts before us a very interesting burden that we as documentary filmmakers are kind of condemned to bear, so to speak. Unlike other art forms, so for instance, if a musician sings, nobody is going to ask her, what is the impact of your music or what is the message of your music. But though we consider documentary an art form, or at least some people do, documentary filmmakers have this peculiar burden of changing the world through their messages, and of not only trying to change the world through their messages, but also kind of being able to, say that, well, this is the impact of my film. So documentary film is, very closely associated with the idea of awareness and change. And so there's a kind of instrumentality to the way we tend to look at documentary film. And as the film theorist Bill Nichols said, it's documentary's association with what he calls the discourses of sobriety, the harder disciplines such as economics and political science and the like, that tend to move it away from the realm of artistic expression towards that of social engineering. And in the Indian context, there is also the historical sort of way in which documentary developed, which is through, state-run institutions, and with the whole, kind of idea of development and of changing the masses as the horizon within which, documentary sort of had its initial beginnings. And so this also is another reason why we tend to naturalize the whole question of impact, and we tend to see it as, something that doesn't need to be really questioned or contested.
This has kind of changed probably the way a contemporary documentary is made, but documentaries has always worked with the premise that these are texts created by us about them and for consumption by us, which kind of calls kind of a relationship of power, a hierarchy between people with the means of representation and the people that you're representing. So this kind of also amplify the ethics and politics of representation and it gets played out in very many different relationships vis-a-vis documentary film. For instance, filmmaker subjects, the filmmaker and his or her text, and filmmaker and the audience. So there are, these all relationships need to be kind of taken on board when you're looking at documentary as a text or any other filmic narrative, so to speak.
So rather than focusing on how our films or anybody else's for that matter have changed the world, what we plan to do in today's presentation and the discussion that follows is to focus on how the making of our films has changed us as filmmakers, as human beings, and also our documentary texts in the many years that we've been making films. And this, in a sense, also resonates with the exhibition that we've put together, Sutradhar, where we have showcased a few of the very remarkable protagonists that we've met in the 30 plus years that we've been making films, and who in very, very marvelous ways have changed the way that we have looked at ourselves, the way we looked at our world. And we'd like to basically share with you some of the insights that have emerged through these conversations, through these interactions with our subjects over the years.
Yeah. No, we're going to share with you. In fact, throughout this presentation, we're going to show you a couple of clips from our work, because that's what we can talk about the kind of context we worked with. This is a film called YCP 1997. It's set in the Yerwada Central Prison in Pune, and the entire film is shot in the prison, and probably one of the only films set in a prison in the Indian context, as far as we know. It was made in 1997. So it features 6 poets who write poetry, and they kind of reflect on the idea of the prison. So I'm going to play a clip from one of the poets in the film.
Really, I feel reluctant. I feel reluctant coming to receive you as my interviewers or crew, because ever since my exposure to the camera as an internationally acclaimed poet, nothing much have come my way, despite the repeated interviews and exposures to the camera. So in other words, I become allergic to the camera. Well, on a larger horizon, prison exists only in the mind, because the 5 senses we are blessed with cannot be removed by prison. Like when I wake up, if I look up, I see the sky, I turn around, I exercise my right toe, walk, I talk with friends, I do even dirty things. Yet, the people from the other side sees me as somebody who is in prison. I wonder when I reflect it, that no, prison exists only in the mind. Because, like my professor has said, it's only a larger prison and a smaller prison.
So the idea of all of us in prisons, and the size of the prison is different. We are in probably larger prisons and he is in a smaller prison, is something that has animated our work. Since then, it was a life-changing experience for us to be in prison and interacting with these poets. None of us are free in the absolute sense, and if at all, freedom has to be talked about. It has to be negotiated collectively. it's not that we are free, because if you reflect back on the idea of a documentary filmmaker as someone who kind of brings change or kind of facilitates change, this is a different way of looking at it, where it's not that we bring about awareness to we bring awareness to the communities. It's just that the idea of freedom, or in this case, has to be negotiated collectively. It also kind of, this interaction with the poets also kind of helped us question this whole idea of normality that we bring to bear. When you look at communities which probably are less powerful than other, because we as a filmmaker have wielded to great extent power over the act of representation. What it also helped us negotiate the appreciation of kind of diversity and the many worlds and many voices that that kind of inform the diversity of, say, gender, religious beliefs, or ways of being, ecosystems. So, it kind of brought home the idea that when we are actually, as filmmakers, we go out into working with communities, we need to kind of keep these in mind, so to speak. What we're going to shift to is that we worked in Kutch for about 8 years, from 2009 to 2017, and we've been working with nomadic pastoralists, and it started off as a project of documenting Sufi music, but then we made 3 films out of it. And it's been also, again, an experience that kind of changed us in many ways, particularly working with the idea of Sufi music. Brought us that texts have plurality and multiplicity. They are not univocal. I'll tell you a story. It's one of the films which I'm going to show you a clip a little later. One of the films is we worked with a community called
Fakirani
Jat, sorry. And they are they have this, they kind of go by, or they hold in great respect a medieval Sufi poet called Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai. He lived in the 18th century, and his work is something very similar to Kabir. And one of the stories that we heard, one of the protagonists tell us, is that Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai's, somebody, a scholar, took 2 lines of Bhittai's and did 360 different interpretations of it. And the scholar took it to Bhittai, and Bhittai said, you can do a little more with it. So the idea of, when we think of texts, particularly in other contexts, texts need to mean one thing. If I make a film or if I write a text, it has to mean one thing. But many of these oral traditions kind of celebrate the idea of many different interpretations. So that's something that as documentary filmmakers, we kind of found very, very liberating and illuminating.
Do you want to show the clip?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the clip we are going to see now is the same individual whom he was talking about, whose name is Haji Umar, and he kind of is completely immersed in Bhitai. You ask him for the time of the day and he'll tell you about Bhitai, He's sort of, whatever the occasion, he'll find a way to weave in Bhitai. So Bhitai is a sort of part of his being. And this is a clip from towards the end of the film where he's kind of reflecting on, what Bhitai has actually meant to him. So we'll screen that.
Mm-hmm.
तो रूहें जब बनी तो उसमें न कोई हिंदू, न मुसलमान, न कोई ईसाई, न क्रिश्चियन, कोई सिख, न कोई, रूहें, सिर्फ रूहें। वहां से बिटाई ने ये सफर चालू किया। तो ये बात जो है ना सूफियों वाली और वो बिटाई साहब वाली बात जो हिदा से होड़ा, वो सारे आज दुनिया भूल के गई। अगर ये जो सूफी वाली बात है, सूफियों वाला अंदाज है, वो अगर सबको समझा दिया जाए तो भले अमेरिकन वाला हो, चाहे जर्मन वाला हो, चाहे जापान वाला हो, चाहे इंडिया वाला, चाहे पाकिस्तान वाला, सब एक ही बात को मान लेंगे कि वो भी आदम के औलाद से है, मैं भी आदम के औलाद से हूँ, और मैं बुरा हूँ, वो मुझसे अच्छा है। मेरा और तो कोई पहचान है नहीं, क्योंकि मैं न पढ़ा लिखा आदमी हूँ कोई, मैंने न तालीम दुनिया में, मुझे न तो मैं पढ़ा न तो मैं पढ़ा। ये पहले मैंने बता दिया कि बकरियां, ऊँटें और गायां भैंसें चराते चराते मैं 60 वर्ष तक पहुंचा। जो मैं आपके सामने बातें कर रहा, वो बातें जो है वो एक ही चीज़ से मुझे मिली कि बिटाई के कलाम को अगर दूसरे के आवाज़ से मैंने सुना तो गहराई, दिल की गहराइयों से सुना कि बिटाई क्या कहता है, तो उसमें गम मिला खाली। तो गम तो इसी दुनिया गम का खजाना में भरी पड़ी हुई है। तो वो आदमी अपना गम का जो ढेर गम है, गम का जो खजाना है, वो अपने में जम कर लेना चाहिए। क्योंकि कोई मुसीबतें आती है ना, तो मुसीबत को बर्दाश्त कर लिया तो समझ लो कि इंसान बन गया। गूंदर जो होता है, दर्द जो होता है, गम जो होता है, वो गम है और देखने से गुम। हर एक जान सकता है गूंदर है, कौन सी चीज है इसकी कोई पहचान नहीं। बिटाई साहब कहता है कि ये है और दिखाई नहीं देता। न इनके हाथ, न इनके पांव, तो ये हवा जैसी कोई चीज गूंदर भी है, लेकिन को जिस आदमी पर आता है उसको घेर लेता है, उसकी तबाही कर देता है, उसकी मिसमार उसको कर देता है, और दिखाई कोई चीज की नहीं। तो बिटाई साहब कहता है कि गूंदर हाथ न पैर गरो मुझ वेण, लेकिन अंदर से कोई चीज है जो सता रही है।
One thing that this encounter with the space of Kutch and Sufi traditions that abound there did to us was to make us feel very small and humble. You know, the sheer scale of things in that space where there is just 300 degrees of emptiness that you're surrounded by. You experience the smallness of yourself, and also the way in which people live their lives with their cattle. There's some very wonderful sort of interconnectedness that you feel of different life forms, a respect, for different life forms. And that's something, we both experience through our encounters with people and space, as well as through our conversations with Sufi scholars. Many of them were non-literate, but they were extremely wise. in this film, I think more than this and this whole series of 3 films that we did, more than ever before, we were already sort of trying to use the image in very many different ways in our films rather than seeing it as description or seeing it as evidence. But here, I think really the kind of underlying philosophy helped us to explore the whole idea of the plenitude of image and sound. The multivocality of it, the affective charge that the image and sound can carry, and their potential to evoke different sort of experiences of time and space. So the way in which we have framed the shots, Jai Shankar was the camera person, the way in which we've used sound, not always very indexically, or even the idea of just witnessing what is happening, watching things go by, not in a hurry to do anything, to change the shot or change the image volume or whatever, but just, somewhere that encounter with Kutch made us, look at things with a far more peaceful eye, with a Sufi eye, I would say, in some way. And, and somewhere we hope that is reflected in this series of films.
Just want to reflect on one dilemma that we kind of face, and we continue to kind of negotiate that idea. So when you talk about, many of these texts are not written down. So they are oral tradition. And what is significant about oral, they are like, most of these oral narratives are like rivers. They kind of flow. So and when they flow, rivers kind of pick up all kinds of things. They're never stagnant. So and it grows, it deviates, it goes from here to there. So the oral traditions themselves are a very interesting way in which texts can manifest themselves. For example, if you talk about Kabir, there's no one single Kabir. There are thousands of Kabirs, and all Kabirs are valid and they all speak about probably some core ideas which are significant, but they are the way in which it's like a river that flows. So in this case, Bitai's work, for example, when we showed this film, you saw Haji reciting. Some of the scholars, he speaks Sindhi, so said, no, this is not, Bitai is like the Shakespeare of Sindh. So they said, no, this is all incorrect. He doesn't know anything. So in the sense that they all kind of hark back on a text which is pristine. It's like a river that's already dammed and it kind of stays the way it is. So that's something that we were kind of concerned about. And also you're working with communities which are, who are, not used to the idea of the medium that you're working with. So how does then one begin to kind of deal with it? So we decided, we had long discussions with most of these communities, and they kind of began to talk back to us, asking us questions about what we are doing. So we decided to embed them into the film in a moment of reflexivity, so to speak. I'm going to show you a clip, then probably we can talk about it. So this is what you're going to see is the wife of Haji. Her name is Aisha, and this is an encounter in the end.
This is her granddaughter.
Yeah, probably she's kind of also not very sure as what we are doing. So, and she's reflecting on the idea. In the process, she's also reflecting on the act of, filmmaking representation. Not directly, but probably those are the kind of horizon in which it's working.
So this is something that she just came out with. She asked us, will you record us singing? So the women don't normally sing in public, but they sing wedding songs. They don't sing as performers, but they sing at weddings. So we were just talking to her, and it sort of spontaneously came up. She says, oh, why don't you record our singing? So we went ahead and recorded it. And then this is something she just said on her own. It was her own reflection after we had recorded her singing. She and a group of friends.
And this girl you see is our granddaughter, and she's kind of teaching her how to embroider, which is, they do a lot of that.
ये इंसान मरी वेंदो ये सुञाणप हूंदी इंसान जी सम्झ ये अलॻि इंसान खे हिकिड़ो मौत छेतरियो आहे ॿी का बाक़ी न आहे हाणे असांजो मामा सोनू वीचारो असांजो मामू हो पोइ अञा बि कैसेट में ॾाढा सुर थो वॼाए नंढो छोकिरो हाणे ई वॼाए थो त अञा असली ते ई असली न हो कमु हाणे ई बि पैदा थी वियो त इंसाननि जो त को भरोसो आहे न हाणे अॼु असीं भले गीत ॻायूं न ॻायूं असांजी पहचान त हिन में हूंदो न हूंदो इहा अॼु असांखे अॼु त ई भारी असांखे वणे थो असीं वेही नथा सघूं कमु कंदा हाणे हेवर जो गाॾी ऊभी आहे ऐं हीअ वेठी आहियां आला कर देखो हिन में भले ॿ गाॾी हुए भले आगे पोइ पासे की न पासे त मुंहिंजे मन में त अहिड़ो हूंदो न जे मुंहिंजो रकाटे में थो पियो कॾहिं न कॾहिं आउं न हूंदी त मुंहिंजा छोकिरा त सुम्हंदा ई सची ॻाल्हि न तॾहिं चवां अॼु जी जेकी आहे न जेकी ऐं कयो था जेकी ई बराबरि कयो घर त आंजा पोइ हूंदा कमकार त आके बहितर त हूंदो न घर अॼु केतिरो टाइम थियो आहे अॼु केतिरो टाइम थियो आहे ऐं हिते फिरो था असांजी ज़बानी गिनो वेठा न असांखे भले खोटी करे त असांखे हक़ बि हिनखे खणी ॾियो था अहिड़ो न आहे जे असांखे खोटो खोटो विहारियो था सिर्फ़ु न आहे असां मथां ख़र्चो कंहिं जात जो ख़र्चो न आहे चाहे को हिकिड़ो ॾकी ॾकी असांजे पियो था
So the question that sort of faced us is how do we insert ourselves into the film? How do we problematize the act of representation itself, the act of reconstructing another world that's different from our own? How do we problematize the relationship of power with our subjects? Because no matter how much you try to make filmmaking a collaborative project, and we do by discussing the film with our subjects, by letting them choose locations, by letting them in a way direct the conversation, but it is still a relationship of power. So the whole idea of, embedding reflexivity into the film, I'd just like to tell talk about, one issue that we face. So with the Jat communities, many of them had a problem with women being, shown or being documented. And in fact, we had gone to another Jat community and there they had flatly said that, no, you can shoot, but no women should appear. And, that became really difficult to, stop the camera every time some woman passed or whatever. So we decided not to work there. And when we came to this community, initially they were also not very sure. So they said, you go and speak to our sarpanch. So we went and spoke to the sarpanch. Then we showed the previous film that we'd done. And finally, this was the second one that we were doing. And finally, they felt that, okay, it's okay for you to go ahead. But there was some kind of anxiety that the women felt. So throughout the film, you find the women are the ones who are kind of, questioning our presence in a sense or reflecting on our presence. Here, of course, Aisha is very positive about what we are doing and she sees some value in it. But in the next clip, this is another protagonist called Rahima, and she is the wife of Mustafa. Mustafa is the one who sings the Baits of Bhitai. So actually, this film is about three cousins. One is Haji Umar, the other is Mustafa who sings the Baits, and the third one is Usman who plays this instrument called the suranda. He's a truck driver. We won't see any clip with him, but what we're going to see now is Rahima and Mustafa in the kitchen together. And this was again a conversation that came up very spontaneously, and in fact this was on one of our initial trips. So we were not even very sure what they were saying at that time because of course we didn't want the interpreter to interrupt what they were saying, and only later we kind of figure out. We knew that they were talking about us, but we were not very sure what it was. So let's see this clip and
काफी व्यू तो बेहतर होगा
काफी व्यू कालो मौलूद बड़ा होती काफी व्यू बच्चे टाने
समझ आना था क्या समझ पेंदी मौलूद
के हाजी मरा समझा मौलूद ये वस्तु है काफी वस्तुआं पेशे ये वस्तुआं हाजी मरा रसाले में समझा रसाले जी माने नहीं बेचन
हाँ रोडन पणा फिर आते
लेकिन मजा आई तो विस्तार में
जंगल में रहता है खाई पीन छड़ता सफाई काम क्या लंगता बचाड़ा तुरंत
विस्तार है पानी विस्तार मजा आई
ये नहीं लगा ना पाना ना घर इडो हीरान था ने रुचन पना लकन कैमरा तई सचा जना बहन पाना इंदी बिचारे में केड़ा बकालन पाना नेरी केड़ा बकाल पाना इंदी बनाने खर्चा सावतारण से तो पाना दे सके
बरोबर है ना
ये बरोबर છે પાણા જે રીતન પાણા કાઢા અમુક પાણા છે ગાલી કો એકાન કોપી પાણા કે ગાસ રખે કો ન્યારે ના કેમેરે જી પણ ન થતા એ બરોબર આમ એ એને મને મુલકમ ખણી ન થતે ન્યારે ના નતે તો પાણા ગયો આ કોંડી પાણા ઉતારે પાણા કે ન્યારે એંદી કે બરોબર એ ઉતારે ને ભલે એને દેશ में कैसेट रखन फिल्म बना तो ये पाना नहीं पड़े अगले माल है जिन खबर पेन जी एंड जेडी जीती वाचा हालन तांग रहता एडी एंड ज्यादा था एडो एंड मुल्का एडो एंड जो कम काना है बस ये एंड तो વધારે भले एंड ढूंढे तो बरोबर है
So this film, there are several instances where we've embedded these conversations in the text of the film, and we felt that these are not questions that are resolved. They're always there, and I think both as filmmakers and as audiences, we need to be aware of the idea that the film is a construction, and it is a construction in and through relationships of power. In some films, we've sort of placed our subject positions more directly into the text of the film, and that's the next clip we are going to show you, which is from a film called Nata, which we made in 2003, and it's a film about two friends, one who lives in Dharavi and the other one on the outskirts, and it's about their very inspiring work for communal amity after the 92-93 violence that affected many parts of Mumbai, including Dharavi. So the film is sort of multi-layered. It's telling several stories. It's telling the stories of these two friends and their backgrounds, how they came to be where they were. It's also telling the story of Dharavi as a space and how that space has a long history. And the other story that it is telling is the story of the filmmakers. So we'll see a clip which is kind of from the beginning, early part of the film, and you'll see how, and we can talk about why we made the kind of creative choices that we did.
वैसे बम्बई आने का एक ज़्यादा कारण मेरे लिए एक और रहा कि बम्बई जो है स्टारों का शहर, तो शायद यहाँ आएंगे तो ये स्टार जो धर्मेंद्र हैं, अमिताभ हैं या राजेश खन्ना है, ये देखने को मिलेंगे। लेकिन यहाँ आकर जब ये देखा कि जिस माहौल में हम रहते थे, तो वहाँ पे तो खैर उत्तर प्रदेश में कितनी भी गरीबी होगी या कहीं भी होगी, लेकिन धारावी जैसा सिलम का माहौल तो खैर नहीं होगा। यहाँ आके जो एक झटका लगता है ना आदमी को कि सपनों का टूटना, वो देख के एकदम हैचंग रह गए कि ये बम्बई है या कुछ और जगह है। आहिस्ता आहिस्ता जब देखा बाहर की बम्बई, तो बाहर की बम्बई भी एक जैसी सुनी थी वैसी भी थी, और एक बम्बई ये थी। एक्चुअली मुल्क में ज़्यादातर बोला जाता कि हम बम्बई में रह रहे हैं, बम्बई में रह रहे हैं करके एक धरावी वहाँ गत्ती जोड़ पट्टी है वो नहीं बताते थे। लेकिन यहाँ के लोग जो थे वो बहुत अच्छे थे, ऐसा लगता था जैसे एक परिवार से उठ के दूसरे परिवार में आ गए।
Nata is about us too, who like Waqar are first generation migrants to the city. We came in the 70s to the other Mumbai and call it home. The first encounter with the city was a rude shock. We were to discover our many joys here.
Nata is thus about us too. If you have the gall, you could call it self-reflexive ethnography. Low budget,
Unfortunately, we do not have interesting stuff to share. No archival pictures of our grandparents, no home videos. Hence, we may not be able to hold on to this imagery for long.
Fade to black when the going is good. Art imitating life.
So this film kind of intersperses our stories with the stories of the other protagonists. And interestingly, one of the first screenings we had was in this very space almost 20 years ago, in 2003. And we also screened it for some other NGO groups and so on. And one of the reactions that we faced after the screening is the idea that, oh, will they understand? Okay, so we can understand all these fancy metaphors you use, toothbrushes and, shoelaces and all of that. But will they be able to understand? So I think this sort of brings to the fore a very interesting question. I mean, who is watching the film and for whom? Are we watching the film for ourselves because something like, identity issues or, the need for communal amity or how do we negotiate, difference is something that's relevant for everybody. So then why are we watching the film on behalf of millions of others who will not understand? But very often, I think as middle-class viewers, we tend to do that. We tend to watch on behalf of somebody else and decide whether they will understand or not. Interestingly, we also made a Hindi version of this film that we showed in Dharavi, and it was a big dhamal screening with almost, I think, 700-800 people, and, the Mohalla committee, Hastis were all there. And people were absolutely fascinated by these bits in between. So they made some sense of it. I don't know what sense they made of it, but they were enjoying those bits. And somebody said in the discussion that followed कि अच्छा अभी हम जानते हैं कि वो लोग जो बड़े बड़े बिल्डिंग में रहते हैं वो कैसे सोचते हैं या उनका जीवन में क्या होता है. So people did relate at their own level to these metaphors and make sense of them. And in some way, the idea of bringing in these diverse stories, why do we always think of stories about them for consumption by us? Why not our stories too for consumption, our stories and their stories for consumption by everybody, And there's no one way of reading any image or reading any, collection of images and stories. Each one would make sense in their own way. Another question which, of course, very often goes along with this, will they understand, is can they handle it, Or, which is actually the whole raison d'etre of censorship. So censorship involves watching on behalf of millions of others who will not be able to handle it and then deciding what they can handle and cutting out the rest, So no sex, no violence, because people are, always on the boil and, anything that they see, these images can have great harmful effects. And these harmful effects are always posited for a less powerful other. So it is either children or young people or, people from rural areas or people who live in the slums or, it's always us acting as some kind of patriarchal filters for a less powerful other. So I think this is something that is so pernicious and so, ubiquitous in our culture. We are basically a censorious society, and we are always deciding on behalf of others what should be seen, We don't know how to listen, we don't know how to watch. But anyway, I'm going on another track. I'm sorry, it's my pet hobby horse.
So, Waqar you saw here, he's a filmmaker himself. He's a tailor who turned film into filmmaking. And his film was shown at Doordarshan after that violence after 92. So, and he has his own way of filmmaking, and we don't have the time to go into his work great detail. But he makes these simple films, and I have worked with him as a camera person, and he basically what he does is he takes clips from Bollywood and he does interviews and they put them together. At first, when we saw it, it was kind of, we found it a little difficult to watch because it's, we have our own aesthetics. But as we worked with him for many years, we realized that, we need to kind of revise our ideas of what is a film. Because when we see this film, and as Anjali said, oh, will they understand? People just kind of, oh, interesting work and stuff like that. But when Waqar showed his work in Dharavi, people just kind of would clap and probably transform themselves. And there is a lot of engagement, which our film can barely kind of elicit. So, the idea that that kind of want to emphasize is the idea of learning from other worlds and also learn from people like Waqar and, particularly people in universities, and probably all of that includes all of us. As researchers and teachers from universities, we carry the notion that, knowledge resides within the four walls of the institution. But 4 decades of our work as kind of with communities has taught us that the importance of learning from the other and rather than learning about them. There are films probably about them, but it's more to do with the way in which what we can learn from them. And that's been a major wealth that we have.
Yeah, so in many ways we see documentary film as, we've called our exhibition, for instance, Sutradhar. And a Sutradhar is somebody who juggles with very many different threads and attempts to weave them together. It may work or it may not work. But it is a way in which you curate different voices and, bring them together. And we feel that in that sense, we are not in control. We may have this feeling of being in control, but as filmmakers, as documentary filmmakers, we are not really in control of anything. We try to be, we desperately struggle to be sometimes. We are not in control of what sense the audiences will make of the film. We are not in control of how our subjects will respond to the film or what they'd say, how they'd participate. So I think living with that kind of uncertainty is a very exciting part of being a documentary filmmaker. And, I think sort of facing the unexpected, you show it to an audience and somebody hates the film and they come up with something very interesting, and then you begin to think about your own work afresh. Or somebody sees something in it that you never, quote unquote, intended, that, it sort of evokes in them. So I think that's the great part about being a documentary filmmaker.
There is an we're going to conclude. The idea of a gazing at the other, gazing at communities which are different from ours. We talked about the idea of when we worked with prisoners or indigenous communities, and we've had a range of experiences working with different communities. So what we one of the moral that, or one of the key learning point, moral is not a good word, is that we have kind of internalized is the idea of gazing not the other but gazing with the other, in some sense, in the sense that there is an organization in Telangana called Deccan Development Society, and they work with marginalized women who are marginalized, and the women are themselves not literate, but they are extremely good with technology. They can shoot films, edit films, and they kind of empower themselves because you don't need to write. They can just take pictures and they know how to edit the film. And one of the terms which is that they use, they call a top-level shot, a top-angle shot, a slave shot.
No, patil.
Sorry.
Patil shot.
No, the other way.
The other way. Yes, correct.
Yeah. So you look down upon the subject. So it's a patel, the landlord looking down, and there is the low angle shot they call a slave shot. And what they privilege in their work is what they call Sangam shot, which is a horizontal shot, which is at the same eye level as, which is very interesting, and they kind of celebrate that idea. So what one is trying to say is that we do not, as documentary filmmakers, gaze not at our subjects, but gaze with them, so to speak, in the sense that we also kind of embed within our films, the moments when they kind of talk back to us, they kind of question us, they kind of bring to bear to the audience that it is a negotiation that is taking place, and it's not reality that's brought to you, but it's a construction of reality. And that's a very delicate negotiation that's happening. So, you've seen several of our examples there. And these are all tentative. We're not saying that, this is something that is desirable, but we have kind of experimented with that idea, where you kind of begin to question one's own position, one's own social location as a filmmaker, and also question the normality of the person, which normally is taken for granted.
So we've sort of talked about some of these ideas in the book that we wrote some years ago called A Fly in the Curry. This is not a plug for the book, but it's quite old already. It's been there for a while. But it does explore some of these issues of reflexivity, of not just in our work, there is a chapter on our work, but also the way in which, independent documentary itself has, been shaped by some of these ideas and the kinds of debates that are taking place among documentary filmmakers and through documentary texts. So I think we'll end here. Thank you so much for listening to us patiently. We would have loved to have an interactive session, but you're too far back and the light is blinding us, so it was very difficult to involve you directly and break up the session. But ideally, we would have liked to do that because we are teachers. But I think now we'll have some time for Q&A. So
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any questions, any comments, whatever, we are quite happy to, or any kinds of observations.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I think it was really relevant for a lot of us. I wanted to ask you two questions. So the first that I wanted to ask you is that both of you have obviously worked together for a very long time. You've made films together and you've also written a book. So if you could talk a little bit about your experience of two creative people working together so closely, because that is sometimes one of the challenges that we face, as students collaborating, and you've had such a long and successful collaboration. So if you could speak about that.
Yeah, we've actually worked together since 1985. That would make it 37 years. Yeah, and we've not killed each other yet. So I think it's to do with respecting each other and understanding each other's strengths and understanding your own limitations, And I think if you do that, when we are in the field, there are certain things that I do and there are certain things that he does. And when it comes to, sometimes you have to make quick decisions on the, move, so to speak. And there you leave that to whoever is more competent to, take that decision and don't question it. So I think that's a ground rule. I don't know. You'd like to add something?
I think it's also, we have different people and gender-wise, all kinds of, so it kind of, we talked about the idea of documentary as a univocal text, but this kind of two different perspectives kind of merge together. It's so in that sense, it's a curation of voices, the two of us speaking. And Hitesh yesterday spoke about a village making film, but we don't have access to a village, so we are only the two of us. And we work together. When we worked with very low budgets, so practically we do everything. I do the camera, we edit ourselves, and we
production management,
sound mixing, or even graphics in the film. the only inputs that we get is from a sound recordist, and we worked with a very eminent sound recordist who did the sound yesterday in Pan Nalin's films as well. Its name is Hari. So we worked with him for many years. So the question is that we just, as we said, we actually academics who strayed into filmmaking, and the two of us kind of somehow managed to kind of stumble through, and we kind of made these films, and it's been an enriching experience. It's not that it is smooth, I mean, but it took some years to work a kind of a, but the bottom line is that we respect each other in terms of what we can bring to bear, and we also fight with each other when in terms of what it should be, but we have successfully resolved it in our lives. So.
Yeah, the first time we were teaching together, that was I think in 90 or 91. So first time we were taking classes jointly. And the complaint from the students was that you're talking at the same time. So then we kind of took that feedback to heart, and I think now we know how to give each other the space.
Sometimes you get a little confused whether she's going to speak, so that's why there was a hesitation.
And of course, writing together is also very challenging because we have very different styles of writing, and so we have different ways of resolving that. Like sometimes I will write a bit and he'll sit back, or he will write and I will sing, and then but writing together is tougher than making a film together or teaching together, would you say?
Been writing together on the same keyboard, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we do
We've
that.
done that as well.
We do that.
I think it helps that you have, your core concerns are very similar. And you're concerned with the subjects as well as the process of making it collaborative, not extractive, and so on. So you're on the same page for the important stuff, I suppose. The other question I want to ask you is, so I was just reminded, supposedly Satyajit Ray is supposed to have said that, when he was criticized for making films only about a certain class of people and so on, he said that I make these films about these people because these are the people that I know best. So he was sort of referring to that space, or this is the world that I know best, or something like that. But when it comes to documentary, there is always this urge or this inclination to go to a community that we don't know about. And that has also been criticized if you look at it from the colonial case and so on, that way, going somewhere. And you have questioned that, and I mean, that's what a lot of, but there is always this dilemma, even that the person in your film, I think Rahima spoke about, that it's this idea of taking something. So how do you, or what are some ways in which even other people can keep in mind that would make the process not extractive? What are some things? I mean, even if you're conversing with them, at the end of the day, you're taking away the footage away. So, unless you can physically take the people with you on your tour of the film, what can you really do about that?
Yeah, well, one thing we do wherever possible, if we are staying in the village, which very often we try to do, is in the evening we screen the rushes, and they're also there, and they see what we've shot. Whoever wants to be there is present, and we screen, and they see what we've shot. And then when we do the rough cut of the film, we first take it back to them. And we always budget for that, even if we have an outside budget, for a trip to the field to show them the film. And we feel that is very, very essential. We've done it right from YCP 1997, where we took the film back to the prison and showed it to our fellow poets. So that we feel is a bottom line, that they need to see it, they need to feel happy with it, and if there's any change that they would like, we would definitely make that change.
Have you had that situation where you had to make a change?
Yeah.
Not
many,
but in a few cases, yeah. And we have made those changes wherever sometimes they say we would like more of it, so that becomes a little difficult to do because you have to fit into a certain length, or you. But if in the other way, I mean, in terms of removing stuff that they don't want, yeah, definitely, we've done it, and we would see that as an essential. Because I mean, if somebody were making a film about me, I would like to have control. No, I would like to know how I was being shown. In fact, very interestingly, when we were making YCP, one of the protagonists, he was not a poet, but he kind of wandered into our film. He was a tabla player, an Italian tabla player. And he knew a little bit about filmmaking. So he told Jaishankar, okay, you sit there. Made him sit where he was supposed to sit. And then he went and he looked through the camera and he said, okay. I mean, I think he moved the frame a little bit. He wanted a particular kind of frame, and that was it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
But that's a very significant question. I mean, I don't know whether we all have answers, but we need to look at it as a very important and significant question.
Yeah.
Hi. This was just lovely.
Thank you.
2 questions. One is, in the 2 clips that you showed where a group of women are talking to you directly about recording and how important it is for them that these recordings exist. And the second is where the husband and wife are having a chat with each other about, we don't know what happens of these clips, we are only trusting what they claim. So the curiosity was there at any point a conversation that later on you had with them without the recordings? That's question 1. And the second question was the point you talked about where there's very little control as creators, as filmmakers, on how one is going to look at your film. And that I feel is true not only for documentary film, but a lot of other cases. That realization does that impact the way you make your next film when you create your next venture? Thank you.
So we shot with them over a period of time, over several visits, maybe over a year or a year and a half. And this was probably on the first visit that but I think as time went along, all of them got more and more comfortable with us being there. And then when we took it back to them, and they kind of laughed at some of these bits, but they didn't ask us to remove it. They were fine with it.
So they were the first one to see it because because of those doubts that they we never screened for anybody else.
Yeah, only after they said okay, then we took it and had other screens.
So what was the question? I mean, sorry that I really. Okay, and the second question?
Because we have less control, we are more finicky or more careful about certain things, like what you ask your subjects, or what, even if they say something, whether you'll put it into the film. So for instance, in YCP, there were points when some of the subjects were talking about, negative experiences in the prison. And we didn't put in any of those bits because, we had gone in with the sanction of the prison authorities, and they were definitely going to see the film. And, if any of that was in the film, it would very adversely, work for them. It might have made the film more, edgy or whatever, but certainly we didn't want to put any of those bits into the film. So, and now, with the internet, there's a whole new kind of ball game where it's really very difficult to decide who's going to see what and what kind of effect it's going to have and how people are going to make. So, for instance, Matwala, the Italian tabla player, many years later, he was released from prison. He went back to Italy and then he went to the Netherlands. And many years later, somebody stumbled across this film, which was online, and saw him in the film. And that had negative consequences for him, for a job that he had. But who would have anticipated that in 97 that this could happen, So, as I said, and we felt really bad about it because we had there was never that intention. But interestingly, he didn't ask us to take it offline. Yeah, he said, let it be there. It's there. That's part of my history.
Can I add something here? Of course, the question that you asked about that control. I mean, we all have desire to control. I mean, it's even our lives we like to control, and we know that we don't have any control. And what's interesting, I mean, in this 3 films that we made, as we worked from 2009 to about 17. So particularly in the second film, when we set up shots, so one of the key ideas of Sufism is that, grief is a fundamental human condition. That tomorrow, all the time, unfulfillment awaits you. You think that everything is, I can drop dead the next moment. So, it's life itself is a series of unfulfillment and grief, or as Buddha puts it, dukkham, so to speak. So here, what we have done is, but we would like to control our lives, isn't it? We think that everything is under my control. So, I mean, that's how certain kind of philosophical traditions have constructed us. Pan and kind of zoom and miss. But in this case, in many shots, what we have done is, I just set up the shot. So that's my idea of control. This is how it's going to be. But what happened, I didn't have any control. You saw some of the shots, but the film has several shots like that. Things that just pass across. Like, for example, something floating by. So that was the idea of what, it's like, I couldn't predict what's going to happen, but in most cases it happened well. Like what Bresson calls grace, the idea of grace, So it kind of fell into our lap. So in many shots, there are birds walking across, animals walking across. So which in the first film that we made, there is the first shot of the film is an 8-minute shot, which is about 4 Nilgais walking across the horizon. I mean, we didn't know where they were going to go, whether they were going to cross, but we just waited for it to happen. So the idea, I mean, in many films you do a strategy. I'm not saying that, it's a desirable strategy. This is what we are kind of trying to do there. So there are many, many shots like this. So there is, of course, we have desire for control, but there is also the realization when you're working with Sufism, then how do you embed that idea? I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah, the idea of transience, that everything passes. That's something that, I don't know, I think you can embed in the text of your film, just in the way you treat your visual material, or sound or whatever. So I think that's something that is a very deep lesson that we've learned from our encounters with these people. How do you handle transience? How do you handle loss? How do you, or you can't handle it. How do you experience it? How do you live through it?
Hello, hi. I just wanted some reflections on like the modern age and how like social media has sort of created like a different relationship between documentary filmmakers and subjects, because oftentimes subjects are micro celebrities and they understand what gaze is, and like they have like a bigger understanding of how like they can control that. So is it better? Is there more artifice in that has to be broken through when negotiating with subjects, or how has the experience changed because of this entire interface that we exist in modern times?
Well, many of the subjects we work with are not really sort of that inserted into social media. Certainly in Kutch, when we first started working in 2009. People didn't even have, didn't have cell phones or any access to technology, not even TV sets. But later we found a change over the years. So for example, when we were documenting in 2017, we found, for instance, some women were reluctant to be represented because they felt that, if it goes online, the film goes online and all the young men in the village can, watch it on their cell phones, and, they didn't like that idea. So more than, celebrities, we face this problem that, people don't want, they want to have control over their image, and rightly so, I would say, so we fully respect that choice that they make not to appear in the film, But that was, I don't know if we faced the other thing of anybody becoming celebrities and not.
No, I don't think so.
Not really. I mean, I think the kinds of groups that we've worked with are not in that space. It could be, but
No, we worked with musicians and poets who have become well known afterwards, not because of us,
yeah.
because in spite of us, so to speak.
Yeah. So, yeah, with even the musicians and who we have worked with, they're not sort of, well, a couple of them did become well known afterwards. But I think, I mean, they would still, if we ask them to participate in the film, I don't think they would say no or, you know, extract a pound of an arm and a leg from us. Of course, we pay them for their time when they are performing. But I don't know, we've sort of not faced that problem really.
Probably it's a new problem that our last film was in 2017.
Yeah, so
after that, the pandemic has put an end to our filmmaking process. So probably, I mean, what do you have any experience with this? Have you faced any?
Which YouTube handle do you have, like stuff? So there's, I don't know. I think my interaction with this kind of subject matter and the subjects are like younger generations, possibly that like people who've grown with this medium have a very different relationship. I think perhaps.
Yeah, possibly.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful presentation. My name is Saurabh Srivastava, and I'm associated with Photography Design Disciplines in Gandhinagar campus. I teach there. Just trying to understand the joy of not only filming, but also not only documenting, but also spending time with different communities. I am also from the similar kind of domain. I document communities, and I just wanted to appreciate the way you documented, spent 8 years, 7-8 years in a community in Kutch, and produced 3 wonderful documentaries out of it. That's really commendable. Thank you for showing it and sharing with us. Thank you.
So thank you so much. Thanks Alpa Virama. Thank you Hitesh and Sabyasachi and Baiju Group for having us over here and this opportunity to share our work, and it's been a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure interacting with you.
Thank you.